Hello, my name is Lauren Knapp, and today I will be talking to you about infancy and toddlerhood. To start us out, I will be talking about the developing brain. So, the first 2 years of life are called infancy and toddlerhood. During those first 2 years, the brain undergoes a growth spurt and it increases in size and number of neuron connections. The plasticity of the young brain allows it to be changed as it adapts to the environment. The brain is fine-tuned in response to the person's environment, and early experiences in life can have important consequences for later development. The neonatal period. Neonates display several states of arousal, and they are also capable of learning. The neonatal period is the first month of life, so this is where birth recovery happens and organ systems begin to function. The neonate's ability to become accustomed to helps reduce confusion in the environment. So basically, them being able to get comfortable helps them feel less confused and start to adjust to being outside the womb. Newborns are usually given a neurological and a behavioral assessment to determine their health. And the neonatal period sets the stage for development throughout infancy. So this is a very important period because, of course, it is the very first month of life. Physical and motor development. The Giselle scales summarize the physical and motor capabilities of average children at different ages, and it's influenced by the environment. The first 4 months, physical growth is rapid, so the infant is growing out of clothes super duper fast, faster than you can even go and buy them clothes. From 5 to 8 months, fine motor skills begin to develop, such as hand-eye coordination. At 12 months of age or a year old, about 50% of infants are standing and taking their first steps. At 18 months, toddlers begin scribbling or feeding themselves, so they know to hold a marker and scribble, or they know to hold a fork or spoon, maybe not the same way we do as adults, but they know that they can scoop up their applesauce and eat it by holding on to it. So they have taught themselves that by that age. 2-year-olds can pedal a tricycle, they can throw a ball, and they can climb. Now, this is why they call it the terrible twos, is because they can climb and get into stuff that they're not supposed to be getting into. The role of nutrition in early development is very important, not just here but around the world, because around the world, malnutrition results in stunting for 30% of children under the age of 5. Stunting is halting or stopping or slowing down growth. Early malnutrition can cause delays in learning and may limit brain development. Most infants drink only or mainly milk up to 6 months old. Today, healthcare providers encourage mothers to breastfeed instead of bottle feed because it has nutrients, there's better immunity, and it's more sterile. The primary risk to children is getting a diet with sufficient nutrients, either because foods are unavailable or they're less nutritious. Sensory and perceptual development. Infants can see whenever they're born about 7 to 10 inches in front of them until it gets blurry. By 3 to 4 months of age, infants focus as well as adults. That's why you will see babies kind of with big eyes staring off into space. They're focused on something. Newborns are highly responsive to the human face, so that's why they love peekaboo so much. Infants' ability to perceive depth can begin as early as 6 weeks after birth, which is very interesting because they can perceive depth before they even know what depth is. Binocular vision starts at about 4 months old, so this is when your views start overlapping and you start getting the vision that you're supposed to have. At birth, they can hear, and it starts to improve over the next few months. and they are especially drawn to human speech. So they can hear all sounds, but human speech is like the most interesting to them. Newborns are capable of sensory integration, which is when they take the 5 senses and they're able to, in their brain, organize it and then process it and react in the way that you're supposed to. Cognitive development. So cognitive development. Infants form perception-based categories even before they acquire a full understanding of what that represents. So kind of like perceiving depth, they perceive depth before they even know what depth is. Jean Piaget believed infants possess mental structures called schemes. Schemes are categories of thought. In the sensory motor period, which is birth to 2 years old, adaptation makes basic reflexes transform into concept. So if you go back to the previous slide and look at the picture, it's a diagram, and that just kind of shows you how reflexes turn into concept. Object permanence is a major accomplishment in the developmental period. Object permanence is being able to know an object is there without actually seeing it. Piaget believed that imitation requires cognitive skills that develop late in this period. A while after, research was done, and they actually proved that it happens a little earlier than what he had thought. Symbolic representation is precursor to language development. Symbolic representation is basically having memory of visual events, and this leads into language development. Piaget overemphasized the significance of motor development and underemphasized the role that perceptual development plays. So Piaget he's already passed away, but he still is a very important theorist to mainly people in the education field. Most of his theories seem like they were corrected or they had to be updated or they were wrong, which in some cases that is true, but you also have to remember a theory is just an idea. It's not an actual fact. So it's not set in stone. It's not always going to be right. And we still use a bunch of other theories of his. So he's very important to the education field. Attachment. So attachment is relationships with mothers or other primary caregivers and their infants. It involves sharing experiences between a caregiver and infant. Mary Ainsworth did a strange situation test. So she basically took a mother and an infant and separated them and put the infant in a room with a stranger who was a caregiver and just wanted to see if the infant would get attached to the caregiver or not. So with the caregiver being responsive, the infant actually did get attached to the caregiver, and it proved that the infant does not just get attached to mothers. The infant can get attached to other caregivers. Their insecure attachment. There are 3 different insecure attachments. So there's resistant, which is anger and avoidance towards the mother or caregiver. Avoidant, which is mixed feelings towards the mother or caregiver. And disorganized, disoriented is confusion about the mother or caregiver. Secure attachment is when an infant is secure in the relationship with their caregiver, that they trust that it will come back to them, that the caregiver will come and get them. So they are usually curious, sociable, and independent. Imprinting. So imprinting is something for animals. This is when there is a relationship between the animal and the mother of the animal. So the imprinting of animals resembles humans with attachment. Harry Harlow did an experiment and research with monkeys. So he took, and he did this a few times with different monkeys, but he would take one monkey and put it in a room with just food to keep it alive. Then he'd put another monkey in another room with a fake monkey that was able to feed that monkey. And then he took another monkey and put it in a room with just a fake monkey with a terry cloth wrapped around it, no food involved. And he wanted to see if there was anything besides, if there was something more to survival other than food. And he did find out that the best survival or the best outcome was from the monkey that was in the room with the fake monkey wrapped in a terry cloth towel, because anytime it got scared, it would jump on the fake mother, and it even actually started talking or communicating with that monkey. So in fact, the monkeys that were tested in the room with just food actually ended up dying, because it proved that they need a social bond. Bowlby stages. So this is where attachment depends on development of synchrony, and this is basically interactions between an infant, or continuous interactions between an infant and their caregiver. Social development is emotional signals. So infants eventually learn to separate once they figure out that they don't need a caregiver for absolutely every single thing. This could be just even holding a bottle on their own. The still face experiment was basically where they had parents stop being emotionally responsive, and it actually made the babies go into distress. So it proved that there needs to be emotional communication in order for the infant and caregiver to have a good social development, or the infant to have a good social development. Temperament, that's basically the characteristic way of a person reacting to the world. There's four, technically 3 stages of temperament for children. There's easy, difficult, slow to warm up, and not categorized. Easy is a baby that's calm. They don't have many explosions, that, as in they don't cry very often, and their schedule's very, good. They get sleep and they get the food they need. Difficult, the child is crying pretty much all the time. Their sleep schedule is off the charts, and they aren't getting food as much or as often or when they need it. Slow to warm up is kind of in the middle, so they have positive and negative things. So they are kind of half easy and half difficult. So they they cry sometimes, but they're happy sometimes. They have a decent sleep schedule, and they have a decent meal schedule. So it's pretty stable. And then the one that people don't normally use a lot is not categorized. But the reason I want to include it is because I think it's very important, since there are a lot of children that actually do fall under that category. I think it's still important because it's still a category that children can be under. And this is when they have a mix of like all three categories, or maybe just two categories. So like all three categories mixed together are, how are what the children that are not categorized fall under. Trust. So that was Erickson's view. So basically, it's trust versus mistrust. So a child that is securely attached, they trust that their caregiver or mother is going to come back and pick them up. So they're more independent and more secure. And for my last topic that I'm going to go over, language development. Receptive language develops simultaneously. Receptive language is being able to understand spoken and written language. Receptive and productive language develop very early on. Babbling serves a social function and helps infants learn the sounds of their language. Deaf babies actually babble too. The only thing is when a non-deaf baby is starting to refine their speech, a deaf baby will not. They just babble and that's it. Most babies say their first word by the end of their first year, but it varies child to child. Language explosion begins at 21 months old, but at 2.5 years old, they start stringing words together and then sentences as the years go by, so on and so on. And then there are two views of language development, which are imitation and reinforcement. Noam Chomsky proposed that children are biologically programmed to learn language. He showed this through LAD, LAD, which is language acquisition device. And cultural factors can influence language development. So this basically means if a child or infant is in a language-rich home, they normally have a bigger or broader vocabulary. And that is it for y'all. Thank you so much for listening today.